Welcome to this spiritual astrology presentation, Kimmel versus Trump, the astrology in Free Speech USA. I'm Altazar of altazarastrology.com and this YouTube channel. Most of my subscribers and followers are aware of the underlying basis for interpretation with spiritual astrology. When looking at a political, cultural, and or moral issue such as free speech, spiritual astrology offers a somewhat objective perspective of insight on the truth of basic goodness and love the universe has for issues of humanity's evolution of consciousness. In previous videos, I've described the current crisis politically, culturally, and economically in the USA, reflecting the challenge of Pluto in the horoscope of the USA. This is the fundamental challenge associated with whether this country embraces furthering the faith and trust in the expansiveness, providence of love and truth of the universe, or embraces the ego fear-based contraction and defensiveness that fosters superiority, condescension, division, hostility, lies, deception, corruption, self-righteous ideology that implies the ends justify the means. And unfortunately, this has been more the predominant orientation of governments and or leaders in the past millennia, which have seen has been underlying violence and destruction in the world. In this presentation, we'll view the astrology charts of Trump, Kimmel, and that of the USA, and interpret the implication each has in contributing to the favorable direction of the United States in regards to the issue of free speech. I am going to bring up the charts of Donald Trump, Jimmy Kimmel, and also a relationship comparison. So now you should observe the chart of Jimmy Kimmel on the left and that of Donald Trump and the comparison chart. I will also preface this by pointing out that Jimmy Kimmel's natal chart is based on his birth date and location of birth. Like many celebrities, I don't have necessarily their birth time, which would make a more accurate chart. So I tend to use 12 noon as the midpoint of the day, which gives 80% or more of accurate information about them, especially for purposes that we're discussing in this reading. The astrology chart of Donald Trump is based on what is considered a more accurate and actual birth time for him. And so that we can use more accordingly for interpretation. Yet it does give enough sensibility for the point of view on free speech that we're going to get into here. So first of all, let me point out the chart of Jimmy Kimmel in regards to some fundamentals about what we share about anyone's karma and life purpose. As I've shared in previous videos, a person's natal chart based on their birth date and location of birth and hopefully time of birth is said to be their spiritual report card in the school of life. The school being one in which we are here to evolve our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors to become more in alignment with spiritual laws and principles that lend towards being a more harmonious and loving person who acknowledges or becomes more conscious of their interconnectedness with all of life. So in Jimmy Kimmel's chart, we see he's born on Monday, which is Moon Day. That implies that he has a deep sensitivity and very likely a profound empathy in understanding people and their feelings, emotions, and motivations. That may also contribute to his insights and even sense of humor associated with public and personal issues. And we see that you see the arrows surrounding here, Sun and Neptune, showing his conjunction in Scorpio in the what we call the Cancer segment of that's the sign Cancer of Scorpio, which is one of the deepest and most sensitive uh, self-actualizing identity energies a person can have. And the fact that he has Mars in Capricorn in a sextile or favorable aspect to his Sun and Neptune, that implies that he's a pretty deep, evolved, highly perceptive, and even very spiritually inclined soul with an activist energy to affect and help evolve the consciousness of the world. So again, I also will preface further interpretation here by saying that I'm not attempting to promote any political or cultural or even religious ideology here. Spiritual astrology is meant to be a tool, if you will, metaphysical, if as well astronomical and scientific ability to help understand people, political, cultural, and or even moral issues in the world. So, with that said, the issue of free speech here focuses on our emphasis of the planet Mercury. And so, Mercury is symbolic of, in each person's chart, how you communicate, how your orientation towards the ability to learn and accumulate knowledge and information and evolve a balance between your mental ability, capacity, information, and knowledge, and your heart's sensibility associated with intuition, empathy, compassion, and ability to share information with the world intelligently rather than egoically or purely intellectually. So we see that Jimmy Kimmel with the Mercury in Scorpio, which can be again deeply empathic, sensitive, a water sign, and Plutonian as Scorpio is the sign that is associated, like each zodiacal sign has a planet that most associates with it. Pluto is Scorpio's planet. And we are in this era and challenge associated with Scorpio and the United States growth and direction of evolution. So he has Mercury, and you see these asterisks sextiling the planet Jupiter. And that aspect, again, the sextile asterisk sign implies an evolved ability to communicate honestly or in the best effort towards using truth and sensibility in a cultural, spiritual, or even political context to further evolve understanding. So one might say that Jimmy Kimmel has a karmic predisposition. That's from our forensic astrology point of view, that he has a natural predisposition to being honest, to draw on moral, but even more deeply, universal spiritual truth to communicate a progressive uh, orientation towards the consciousness of society. Now, um, we're going to look at the astrology of Donald Trump. So, with the chart of Donald Trump, I have shared this numerous times in many of my previous videos regarding varying political and societal issues associated with Donald Trump from the very beginning in January 20th of his inauguration on. And so, for those of you who have viewed my many videos, even including the character evaluations associated with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump during the campaigns for their election last year, I talked about the chart of Donald Trump. So some of you have heard this over and over again, but I'm just going to focus on the planet Mercury here, which is the most poignant uh, factor associated with, as I share in previous videos, uh, I give everyone a chance. Your astrology chart is your spiritual report card of your karma and your predisposition of behavior, attitudes, and beliefs you bring into this life from prior lifetimes. And we have free will in this life to heal, to get out of denial about what might be our karmic predisposition towards negativity or a lack of harmonious contribution to the growth and evolution of society and the world at large. And unfortunately, you know, I look at whether or not the history and current behavior of someone is either still stuck in their hard karma or negative predisposition, or in fact, whether they've evolved and healed. So I'm not going to make a prejudicial judgment about anyone uh, unless I've seen their history and current behavior. But I can honestly say that unfortunately, Donald Trump's Mercury square, and in spiritual astrology, a square is the negative karmic predisposition of a certain symbolic representation. In this case, Mercury representing how a person has communicated or their communication and intellectual orientation. The Mercury square Neptune is the negative predisposition karma of someone who has likely been or has a proclivity towards being an opportunistic, pathological, narcissistic liar. And or even as a new current term associated with malignant narcissism, a gaslighter. That's someone who will say or do anything to justify or promote their own belief system or ideology or point of view politically to win, to dominate. And so, need I say any more? Uh, and when you know, this does imply with a Venus Saturn conjunction, someone who is also in conjunct, that's the picnic table here with their moon, thin-skinned. That's what most malignant narcissists are. They can't take a joke. They are highly reactive to and defensive in regards to criticism because their main defense is that they are egoically self-righteous, superior, and their approach is to defend, if not criticize, if not try to uh, diminish or destroy any sources of challenge, criticism, and or contrary belief systems. So let's see here. Uh, why would Donald Trump attack, if not try to bring down Jimmy Kimmel? Well, I will say that this is associated with, I'm trying to reduce any interference from my phone here. And there we go. All right. Well, when we look at the compatibility comparison of Donald Trump, now we put the planetary positions of Jimmy Kimmel here around the chart of Donald Trump. Uh, and so we see, you know, if you've observed Jimmy Kimmel live historically over even the past years, uh, let alone this past year, the election campaign and Trump's current administration, Jimmy Kimmel is directly a uh, critic and a joker towards the beliefs and behaviors of Donald Trump, comedically and quite honestly, and as this kind of comedian can be like the challenge to point out the emperor is wearing no clothes. So when we see here Mercury of Donald Trump, I've pointed out in the square to Neptune, the proclivity towards being a highly defensive, deceptive, pathological liar. Uh, and the Saturn position of Jimmy Kimmel, 6 degrees Aries, in direct what we call square to his Mercury and direct opposition to Donald Trump's Neptune. And Saturn representing how one may be approaching the greater public implications politically, culturally, or sociologically. Wow. Yeah. Jimmy Kimmel is a direct, scrutinous critic of the speech and or communications of Donald Trump. Do I need to say more? But yeah, I will say more. Uh, when we look at the Mars position of Jimmy Kimmel, as I've discussed it in his chart, he has the Mars in an integrity to his sun sign Neptune. Uh, his Mars here in the house of entertainment associated with that's the fifth house of Donald Trump. We're looking at a relatively accurate birth time for Trump. Kimmel's Mars is opposite the Mercury. That's an attack, or if you will, in this case, a critical evaluation, not only of his communications for Trump, but also in a midpoint critic of Saturn in Donald Trump's chart, that of the implications of his politics. So you can see here, and this would also imply, you know, an aggressive enemy of Donald Trump, or if Trump was being honest or in more alignment with the favorable political, cultural, economic orientation for the United States, then this would imply Jimmy could be actually an activist supporter for Trump. You see, there's no, absolutes here. So back to the compatibility perspective. Well, looky here, Jimmy Kimmel's Venus. Venus in Libra in direct square to the Mercury of Donald Trump and conjunct his Neptune. So there you go in the house of economics, direct cultural contradiction to Donald Trump's orientation to communication or cultural, if not humorous, yet cynical or critical evaluation of Trump's communications. So now we're going to move on to look at the implication with the chart of the United States. So we're going to start by looking at the chart of the United States, and then we'll look at what was going on in the country at the time that this whole issue came to light with the FCC Director Carr bringing up the issue associated with Jimmy Kimmel's reference to the and not a direct reference to Charlie Kirk, but just maybe a less sensitive implication associated with MAGA followers of Charlie Kirk and the assassin Tyler Robinson. So that's what really ignited the factor associated with the FCC and then ABC's uh, suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's comedy show, Jimmy Kimmel Live. So let's take a look here at the chart of the United States. So uh, you've seen me talk about this before in previous videos, but I just want to point out what is associated with free speech in the chart of the United States. See, we look at the planet Mercury, and Mercury at 24 degrees Cancer. That is a very spiritual position associated with speech and communication politically in the United States, and the value that that legal democratic allowance in our First Amendment has to that is morally based in the notion that people, this is the Pisces segment of Cancer, people have the right to uh, share their points of view, provided that it's not directly a confrontational violence that can be debated or, presented politically to be resolved in a democratic voting capacity. And that is that Mercury aspect to the planet Neptune. So the right to free speech is a sacred segment, and it's not associated, it doesn't have to be associated with any particular religion. This is a universal principle that spiritual astrology reflects regarding the right to share one's intellectual, political, cultural, spiritual point of view uh, without being hostility or confronted or restrained or uh, restricted. And so, with Venus, the Libra sign on the midheaven of the chart, and Libra being predominant in the political public dynamic of the experience for the public in the United States. Say Saturn in Libra is the karmic challenge. Libra is the sign of communications, and it's the sign of justice. It's the sign of the scales of justice. And Saturn in Libra is considered exalted karmically. It implies that the United States is meant to be the beacon, if the Statue of Liberty, of free speech and representative of a political system that demonstrates the efficacy of the democratic process associated with free speech. And Saturn trining Uranus in the Aquarian decanate, and Uranus, the planet of Aquarius, in the Gemini sign of communications, again, further enhances and exemplifies the importance of the democratic process of free speech as it can contribute to the greatest acceptance of law and order in the United States, determined by debate, discussion, free speech, and ultimately democratic uh, voting processes for acceptability of our cultural, political, economic, and sociological structure. So, with that said, now we look at what was going on at the time of around September 19th and the preceding days up to September 19th. Where were the planets at that time? You see, I have them positioned here around the chart of the United States as it's associated with Washington, D.C. So we see here that is it any coincidence? You see, those of us who have followed astrology on this deep level for many years and know what a real horoscope is it any coincidence that the planet Mercury we're talking about through this whole reading, the planet Mercury representing communications, speech, and the sharing of information, is in a conjunction with the political expression, the House of the United States. Here it is, Mercury in Libra. And so, not only that, but we see that Jupiter is in the sign Cancer and is forming this near conjunction with the planet Mercury in the chart of the United States. And as Jupiter will continue this year to move forward, it'll form an exact conjunction with Mercury. So as I've talked about the Pluto challenge to the United States, whether or not we will fall into the trap and the degeneration of an oligarchic authoritarian plutocracy, or whether or not we will move ahead and transform as Pluto is attempting to coax the United States towards greater democratization of our society, not the demonization of enemies from the egoic point of view, such as the demonization of immigrants and others, or even Democrats calling them extremist leftists or etc. So this is what is being highlighted here. And so when we look at the chart of Jimmy Kimmel, and I should also point out that in the chart of the United States, at the time of the previous week and during the current time until Jimmy Kimmel was restored to his position on ABC, looky here, Mars in Libra in almost an exact square to Pluto in the chart of the United States, 27 Capricorn, 27 to 28 degrees Libra in the chart of the United States affecting Pluto. So there you see a direct confrontation of the forces of authoritarianism, Mars in the house of politics and organizations and ideologies, and direct confrontation to the political freedom, or whether or not the forces of authoritarianism and uh, plutocracy restriction would take hold in the United States. And then we see in the chart of Jimmy Kimmel the position at that time last week in his horoscope chart, indicating Mars almost exactly conjunct his south node and opposite his north node. That's a direct challenge to his highest karmic growth evolution, being confronted by a negative, if not aggressive or violent force. And we see that Mercury, same one, 2 degrees Libra, almost direct conjunction to his Venus position. Remember, Venus being that of in confrontation with Trump's Mercury. And so that challenging his cultural and entertainment orientation to communication. And the Jupiter position in the sign Cancer at 20 degrees, he would win because Jupiter exactly trining his sun sign. So had Trump any sensibility, or Brendan Carr of the FCC any metaphysical sensibility, or an astrologer to consult with, would realize that they would lose in a confrontation associated with an attempt to bring down Jimmy Kimmel. You're not going to win legally against someone who has Jupiter trining their sun sign exactly during this confrontation. And the planet Mercury in the chart of Donald Trump moving to an exact square to his Mercury on top of his Neptune, being an exact challenge to whether or not he is promulgating truth and a positivity for advancing consciousness regarding this issue, or whether, again, He is engaged in a malignant narcissist's attempt at gaslighting and or diminishing enemies through lies, deception, and or aggression that does not serve the greater good because it's not based in truth and legitimacy for the favorable advancement of free speech. So, in summary, what we are seeing here is in the chart of the United States, a challenge associated with communications in the public, political, cultural dynamic of the United States, Mercury and Libra in the 10th house of the United States, uh, Jupiter in Cancer, moving to another uh, conjunction with the Mercury of the United States, implying uh, the extent to which the public is exposed to issues that contribute to greater expansion, Jupiter, of free speech and the process of the democratization of openness in communications, journalists, comedians, and others uh, to advance an understanding and an advancement of the political economic circumstances of the United States and exposing lies, deceptions, ego-based forms of communications that are meant to prop up uh, ideologies like Christian nationalism, which Trump and others of his inner circle are attempting to implement through authoritarianism contraction in this country. And so we see that Jimmy Kimmel, Jupiter in the sign Cancer, exact trine to his sun sign, is one of the leading exponents and communicators of truth and especially truth and exposés that contribute to the advancement of the democratization of free speech in this country. Whereas when we see the chart of Donald Trump at this time, we see a uh, challenge to his political ideology, Jupiter nearing his Saturn. We see Mercury directly challenging his karmic predisposition of being a malignant, narcissistic, pathological liar who will attempt to do anything to defeat or restrict or destroy his enemies for the sake of his own ideological and self-absorbed belief in his absolutist uh, self-righteousness. So, if you have appreciated the insights offered here, I would request becoming a subscriber if you haven't already to enjoy the additional videos that I'll be contributing in the near future uh, by receiving notifications about those videos. My next video is very likely going to be on the recent and historical assassins associated with political violence. And that will highlight uh, that of Tyler Robinson, Luigi Mangione, and the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. So stay tuned for notification about that. You're welcome to contact me with questions you might have about any of my videos or request a free introductory reading. Uh, and, I'm delighted to be able to share that with you. And visit my website, altazarastrology.com, for further exposition of all the different kinds of readings that I do. And or explore among the other 32 videos I have here on my YouTube channel, Altazar Astrology.